Good afternoon, and welcome to today's IABC Heritage Region webinar, Are You a Commodity? 3 Ways Professional Communicators Can Avoid the Trap. My name is Greg McCormick, and I'm Communication Chair for the IABC Heritage Region. Today we'll be talking about ways to avoid falling into the commodity trap in your own career and helping to build the success you seek. Why have professionals in HR, IT, and even security been outsourced to low-cost providers? They became commodities when leaders and other financial decision makers perceived that their work didn't add value in a way that exceeded their costs. The same is happening to communicators, and it's time to take action and avoid falling into the commodity trap in your own career. In today's webinar, leadership and career coach Darcy Eikenberg will explore why this trend is exploding and share some specific actions we can all take now to avoid becoming a commodity, or to turn perceptions around if you feel you may already be there. As a leadership and career coach, Darcy helps high-performing leaders and teams manage through constant change. Working with companies such as Coca-Cola, State Farm, Deloitte, and others, she brings her clients a practical, real-world perspective that creates business results with a touch of humor and heart. She's a longtime IABC member and will be speaking this summer at the 2020 World Conference in Chicago. She's the author of Bring Your Superpowers to Work and writes regularly at redcaperevolution.com, where you can sign up to get other free career tools and insights. Before we begin, we have a couple of housekeeping notes. I'd like to introduce Amy Miller, an IABC Heritage Region board member and our tech associate for today's webinar. Amy will review a few quick points to help you gain the most from today's experience. Amy?
Thank you, Greg. Everyone, if you would like to watch today's webinar in full screen mode, then mouse to the top right portion of your screen and you'll see 4 small arrows. Click on that symbol to toggle in and out of full screen mode. During the presentation, if you'd like to send us a comment or question for discussion, please use the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Just mouse down to the bottom of your screen and your toolbar will appear, including the chat button. If any of you have joined with others watching in the same room using a single connection, that's great. If that's your situation, we ask that you kindly let us know how many are at your location using the chat tool, just for our records. Darcy will pause a couple of times to take questions briefly during the presentation, and will also answer questions at the end. If you'd like to join the conversation via chat later, right now we're showing some thoughts that may spur ideas for you. Also, today's webinar is being recorded. As a registered attendee, you will receive the following: a link to our very brief survey as you leave. Please take a moment to respond so we can keep making improvements. You'll also receive an email with links to the recording of today's session and registration links for the next IABC Heritage Region webinar. We'll also include the survey again in case you missed it on your way out. And now, back to Greg.
Thank you, Amy. Now let's get started. Darcy, take it away.
Okay, hi everybody. I am so excited to be here with you all today. And let's get to the beginning of our presentation. Ta-da, my hands are washed. How about yours? Okay, all right. Okay, so I want to start just with being able to recognize the most important person who's in the room here with us today. Oops. Do we have me still on the video? And that is you. You're the most important person who's here today. And let me do a check just to make sure that we didn't lose ourselves in the switch off, because I don't see that we're on our Zoom. So Amy, you still got me out there?
Your video is on, your slides are not showing.
Okay, let's try that again then, folks. Okay, awesome, great.
And then you can just change it to, there you go, perfect.
We got it now, we got it now. Thanks, guys. So, you know, you guys had a lot of different choices of the places you could be spending your time today, right? You could be in the middle of a meeting, you could be hard at work in doing anything and everything that you do. Or, you might be focusing on all of the things that we're having to talk about with this crazy time that we're in the middle of right now. But instead, you did something else. You were here. You showed up. You're investing in yourself today. And I just want you to know that not everybody does that. For everybody who showed up here, there's other people who saw it and said, I don't have time for that, or I'll catch up on that kind of information another time. I'm just too busy. But you didn't. You're here. And so for that, I just want you to take a minute and give yourself a little pat on the back. Congratulate yourself, because it's important that you take the time to invest in yourself from time to time amid all the other things that you're doing. So well done. I am so glad that you're here. Now, as you heard from Greg, we're going to talk about how not to become a commodity and the traps that I'm seeing people fall in. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a pretty upbeat, optimistic person, but I'm worried. Here's what I'm worried about. In the work that I do as a coach, I get to travel around the country, and I get to talk to leaders and teams of all different kinds of industries and of all different kinds of backgrounds. And I always ask the question, what's the most important thing that's happening in your business right now? And they might tell me about efforts to retain and recruit new employees, or they might tell me about some of the things they're trying to do to get more customers or keep the customers that they have. But at the root of everything is some aspect of communication, of connecting, of making sure that we're reaching people, that we're motivating behavior, that we're creating change. And so I hear this, and as a longtime communication professional, I nod and I smile, and then I say, so what investments are you making in your communication resources? This is the answer I hear. Yes, I hear crickets. Now, wait a minute. These folks are smart, right? And so they tell me things like, well, we're investing in Slack. Yes, we're implementing Slack or Salesforce, or they mention some other tool of the moment. But nowhere do I hear that we're investing in the people, the deeper learning, the time it takes to really do professional communication and get the results that we need in our businesses today. This is a concern for me. This should be a concern for you. Because the truth is that you, my dear professional, experienced communicator, are becoming a commodity. And so this makes me crazy, right? Because here we are, we're in a time when the most important things in the world that we can be doing are to be connecting with people, are to be influencing, are to be helping people sort through all of the different ideas and noise out there, and to get a message that moves them forward and that helps support not only our companies, but our communities and others. So I believe that it's time for a revolution in how we think about our work as professional communicators, and especially how we see and we speak about our work. And that's what we're going to focus in on today. And personally, this is why I call my company Red Cape Revolution. Because remember when you were a kid and you grabbed a towel or a sheet and you threw it around your shoulders and you felt confident, you felt in control. Well, what if you could feel that way every day at work? What would change in your life at work then? What would change for the people that you serve in your company, in your community, in our world. I believe that this revolution is one person at a time. It's you and me in our own worlds, one at a time. And our world needs you now more than ever. So I'm glad you're here to dive into this topic and to get this wake-up call. And the tools that I'm going to share with you, some of them, one may resonate more than others. And so what I often find out is that people want to go deeper. And so if you want to go deeper on any of the information that I'm going to share with you here today, I have as a little thank you to you, a way that you can get I've curated a whole page of some of my other tools that go deeper. And all you need to do if you want that is just to text the word TRAPS 2020 to the number 44222. So when you do that, it'll ask you for your email, and then I'll be able to send you the link to where I've put together some follow-up information. So I'll share this with you a couple other times during the webinar, but TRAPS 2020 to the number 44222 to get deeper information for after the webinar and beyond. Okay, so let's take a step back. I use this loaded word, right? I use this word commodity. What do we mean by a commodity? How does a person, how does a profession become a commodity? Well, you might remember, for those of you that are old enough, there was a time when something like coffee was considered a commodity. It was basically, a cup of coffee in Detroit was the same as a cup of coffee in Denver. It was all the same. It didn't really matter. But one of the things that has been happening is that when something is all the same, and in our work, when our jobs start to look the same, when the work starts to look the same, when we can write it down, when it can all be prescribed in the same way, our work also becomes a commodity. You may have been at IABC in 2018 when Seth Godin was on stage. And Seth said this, he said, when someone can write down the steps of what you're doing, you're a commodity. And of course, we can take those steps, we can outsource them to the lowest cost bidder, we can teach a computer how to do those steps. And if you don't think this is happening in professional communication, I need to introduce you to our friends in these fine professions. Every single one of these professions is experiencing, has experienced what the communication profession is experiencing now. It is being downsized, being reduced to the lowest common denominator. We can't let that happen to you. We can't let that happen to the profession of communication. Because the truth is that today, things have changed. We no longer just need people who can execute what I call the stuff, who can just do the work. The resources are at our fingertips. I mean, the fact of this webinar alone, these are tools that professionals didn't have 20, 25, 30 years ago. We don't need people just to do the work. What we need is the talent and the thoughtfulness to do the work that matters. Now, what do I mean by the work that matters? What matters are the things that have mattered to human beings since the dawn of time. There are things like connection, community, meaning, interpretation. How do I figure this out? How do I understand this? There are even things like happiness, and dare I say it, love, that four-letter word in so many of our environments. But these are the things that matter. These are the things that make you stand out and make sure that you are not a commodity. These are the things that make a difference. So now you might be scratching your head a little bit and say, well, you know, what is that difference? the question I want you to ask yourself right now, before I give you some of the tools to avoid being a commodity or to get out of becoming a commodity if you feel like you're already there. It's like, are you transactional or are you really transformative? Is the work you're doing just, I'm moving things from here to there, I'm creating things just because that's how we always did it, am I just handing off information, or am I really doing something that's creating a bigger difference? It's creating more of that connection, that meaning, that community. What about for you? And you may be thinking, you know, sounds all nice and good, but I don't work at a nonprofit. I can't see how I could, through my job, create meaning, create connection, create community. I have to just get stuff done. Well, I want to introduce you to a little company you probably have heard of called Starbucks. And it may surprise you to recognize that Starbucks does not sell coffee. Yeah, you heard me. Starbucks doesn't sell coffee. What Starbucks does is sell community. Starbucks sells connection. Why do you think that they've invested in spaces where people can come together? Why do you think that the barista, they used to write, now they type on the label some version of your name instead of giving you a number? Starbucks has figured it out. You can figure it out for your career too. You can have meaning, but we need to know our real value. We need to understand it, and we need to be able to speak up for that value. Because when we don't, when we just get into the trap of the busyness of business, when we just execute without thinking about the why or questioning the why, we become a commodity. And then when others in our world, the leaders that I talk to, the teams that are around us who are not professional communicators, see just the end output, they just see the work, they think, why do I need her to do that? Why do we need him to do that? I think we could do it cheaper. I think we might not need it at all. You are not a commodity. And so we need you to not be one. So with that little diatribe, I'm going to take a sip of water and I'm going to throw it to Greg to see if we have any questions out there or any other comments, thoughts, before we move into solving some of the tools that can keep you out of being a commodity. Greg?
Okay, thanks, Darcy. I do have a couple quick ones for you. The first one I think you started to answer just now. How can we convince leaders that investing in the communication team pays off?
Right. So the tools that we're going to talk about are going to be ways to help you persuade and get clear about what you want to say to leaders, what you need to say to leaders, and how you also stay visible in front of leaders and help them realize that your work is not just about the stuff, as I call it, that it's about something bigger. So if I don't fully answer that by the time we're done, raise that question again, but that's a great question. And that's at the heart of it, right? We need to be making sure we're not just understanding it ourselves, which is a start, but communicating our value with others. So thanks for the question.
Okay, and then here's another question that's kind of along the same lines. How do we prove to leadership that we should be, and we being communication, should be at the strategy table?
Yeah. So the proving part comes in the understanding of what is the value that you're actually bringing, and being able to talk about it in terms that matter, not in terms of the tactics. And so actually that's going to be a great transition into our next set of, for the webinar, which is the ways you can avoid the trap. So Greg, any other questions unrelated to that? And we can
there's only one more that I wanted to bring up, and I think you may touch on it as you go forward. There's someone who's asking about the challenge of measuring value and basically showing your value, but they're an introvert by nature.
Yeah, yeah. So I get concerned that there are a lot of people who will label themselves an introvert. And there's certainly, there are those of us who are great out in front of a bunch of people and talking to lots of people, and those of us that need our time to focus and our time to be inward. But the thing about introverts is that the introverts are great one-on-one. And so just because you think of yourself as an introvert, don't think that you can't speak up for your value. Don't think that you can't have a bigger conversation and redefine what you do and be seen differently in other people's eyes, because it's not about being in front of the room of 300 people or speaking on some stage. It's one-to-one. But the first thing is we're going to get clear on what is the value that you really bring. So I think some of these things come together with some of these tools, but let's go back to those questions as we go along if there's still some open questions. Sound
Okay,
good?
and there's just one more question that came in. And it's a question, the challenge is quantifying the value when the decisions are made based on financial numbers or bottom line decisions.
Right. So when you think about the bigger piece of what is it that I do, and we're going to get into a formula for you to be able to think about how you're even talking about your value, then you can think about how would I quantify that? And sometimes here's another piece that I find that we may not be able to quantify it into a revenue gained or a plus number, but we may be able to quantify it in a risk averted, in a pain point. And sometimes speaking to the pain is actually more effective than speaking to the positive. So, so as we go through and look at some of these different strategies, want to go back to then how would you use this and then communicate the broader value of the team? How do you make sure that you are connecting what you're doing to a value? So let's move into the strategies, and then let's go back to some of those questions on the end with some of these tools in hand. Sound good?
All right, will do, Darcy, thanks.
Great. So, okay, so great questions, by the way. Terrific. I'm so glad we're thinking about these things, because it's exactly what we need to be doing to make sure that we don't get stuck in a commodity trap. So there's 3 tools that I'm going to share with you about how we can avoid becoming a commodity, or how we can get out of it if we've gotten stuck there somehow. And this also goes for those of you who are asking questions about your teams. So if you're wearing your leader hat, think about this in terms, as I go through these 3 steps, what can I be helping my team do better? Where are those windows of opportunity for me to be able to coach, to lead by example, to challenge my team who maybe is a little too comfortable just in executing without really thinking about the bigger reverberation, the bigger reason behind why they do what they do. And this first strategy is to get clear on your superpowers. Now, what do I mean by superpowers? Well, when I talk with professionals in all kinds of industries, it's very easy to get caught into the stuff we do. Oh, I create video, or oh, I manage the website. And this is especially hideous for communication professionals, because we have all these things, these tools, and when we start to drape ourselves in those tools and define ourselves, we think that's our superpower. That's where others see those things. They don't know all the work that goes into it. You make it look too easy. Instead, we have to be thinking on a bigger level. And the truth is that what makes you great is usually not something that's listed on your job description. I've had a client at one point who was a healthcare consultant, and she, like many women in the world, experienced breast cancer. and she fought through it. She survived and went back to work. But she found that her work felt different for her. That the same exact job, she was making some different choices about how she worked with her clients, how she challenged some of the thoughts, different ideas that she brought to her work. Part of what she went through in her illness became part of her superpowers. That's not on her job description. Your job description probably doesn't say, bring in other knowledge that you have, bring in the way that you do things, bring in your heart as well as your head. But your superpowers can be a collection of things that make you great and unique. And one of the tools that I think is very helpful as you are trying to really articulate, what is my superpower and what is it that adds value to this company, to this work? How am I about more than just the stuff? This is what I call the who and do what statement. So I'm going to walk you through it. And this is not an elevator speech. I'm not big on elevator speeches. I don't really want to talk to people in elevators. I don't know about you, but here it is. The who and do what statement. It's the I, and then there's an action. There's something that you do that's in your superpower space. And then with the people or process of things, I'm going to give you an example of this for a minute, so that something bigger happens. The so that is the part we forget. The so that is the part that if you are trying to communicate your value to leaders, if you are you're part of a team and you want them to see you not just as the, oh, and now so-and-so just goes and makes everything look pretty. Oh, dag me, right? The so that's the important. What's your so that? So in a real life example, someone could say, you might be saying something like, I am the communication manager in the department. But what's the real superpower here? What's the bigger so what? As you think about it, as you look closely at it, it may be that you lead the content strategy for the $5 million department so that our 1,200 people team can get the data that they need to do their jobs and help our customers. And this probably isn't even as strong as it could be. Yours is probably stronger. What's the so what? Why do you do the video? Why do you work on the newsletter? Is it about the work or is it about the facilitation of the people? Take a minute after this webinar and jot down some thoughts for you. And if you can't see it, because a lot of times, excuse me, we can't see it for ourselves. We might need to connect with a trusted friend, maybe a colleague who is in another department, or maybe it's a coach or mentor or fellow IABC member, and do some experiments. Have them look at it from a different way. I'll often say you can't see the label from inside the jar. And I think this happens to a lot of professionals, and especially a lot of communication professionals that I know, because they're so focused on getting the work done and keeping things moving and taking care of their colleagues and taking care of the customers that they're not stopping to say, yeah, what really is the difference that I make? What is the difference I want to make? How do I want to be seen? And so this is a little bit of an experiment that you can take on if you are worried about becoming a commodity right now. I'm going to take a quick drink of water and let you take a couple notes. Okay. Sorry about that. A little frog in my throat. All right. You ready for the second tool? This strategy is often a little shocking to people, but if you followed me, if you've heard me speak before, you might have heard me talk about this. It is master the art of bragging. Oh yes, I said it. I said bragging. Most of us were taught that brag is a 4-letter word, right? I mean, I was taught that it's not okay to brag. We shouldn't brag. But the truth is that bragging with an intent to serve is a great way to be able to communicate the value that you bring, to make sure that you are not shortchanging yourself or your team, so that they definitely know, that the people around you know what is that value that you create, why you're needed. I'm going to sneeze again, so if you'll excuse me. Just allergies? I'm okay? All right. I have a formula for you to use. If this makes you uncomfortable, that's great, because discomfort is the way that we grow. It's the only way we grow. But to start bragging, you've got to first find your pride point. You've got to find something that you have done that you are proud of. I've had people say, you know, Darcy, pride goeth before a fall. But the truth is that being proud of something isn't putting someone else down. It's actually lifting you up so that you can be in a better position to serve something you care about. There's a difference between arrogance, which I think people are afraid of, and it's why we don't want to talk about things for ourselves, and confidence, which is actually very attractive. People want people to be confident and care about the things that we're doing. And if you don't care about the thing you're doing, why are you doing it? So I want you to do this. I want you to first find a pride point. Think about something in your life at work that you are proud of. And it doesn't have to be something that's in your annual review. It doesn't have to be something that you ever got a bonus check for. Might not be something anybody has known. But what's something that you're proud of? I had a client who was a chief marketing officer, and she had a really rough relationship with the chief financial officer. And they had to work together all the time. But she worked on it intentionally. And she moved that relationship from being stinky to so-so. Now, no one's going to write you a bonus check for that. But it mattered to her. And it showed who she was. And when she was bringing her superpowers forward of building relationships and understanding others and trying to create community, worked for her. So what's your pride point? When you have your pride point, or just as a check, let's make sure that thing you're proud of is in your superpower space, that it represents something that you love doing, that you at your best and highest use, that you want more of, the way you want to contribute more. Because the mistake I see people doing often is that there's something that they got pulled into doing because no one else around could do it. And what happened? They rocked it. They did an awesome job. And then what happened the next time that kind of project came around? You guessed it, they got tapped. Suddenly they've built a reputation for something that they don't love doing, that's not in their best and highest use. So if we're going to start putting the right words in our mouth, if we're going to start bragging about things that are adding value, then we want to make sure that we're talking about the things that we want more of, the things that are in our superpower space. So the surprising part about how to do this, how to brag in a way that others don't gag, is that then to add in emotion. Now, what do I mean by emotion? Well, listen to these two statements. So I could say, I was named to the CEO's task force. Or I could say, I was so honored to be named to the CEO's task force. What do you hear is a difference? There's a feeling in the second one. There's an emotion. And actually, quite honestly, it's my emotion. So somebody else can't say, I'm wrong. You can't say, no, you're not. It's my data. And so adding emotion to a pride point that reflects something in your superpowers is a way to be able to find these little moments where you can brag on yourself and master the art of bragging so that you can use these opportunities when you are in meetings, when you are with somebody in the hallway, when you're in a one-on-one with your boss, to be able to communicate in small bites the ways that you are not a commodity, the ways to shift out of the conversation of talking about the stuff, to shift to the conversation of the value, the meaning, the bigger thing. I was so proud to bring in the annual report on time and on budget. I was so honored to be invited to speak on the world stage for IBC. What's yours? What are the things that others in your world need to be hearing from you more often that get to that bigger, so what, that get to that bigger way that you show your superpowers? We have to start mastering the art of bragging. We have to start speaking up for the work, because the truth is the work does not speak for itself anymore. The work looks simple. You make it look simple. It looks like everybody else. It looks like someone else could do it. What is special about you and the way you do your work? We've got to speak up. And this takes courage, right? We've been taught, oh, let me just keep my head down. Let me just do my work. But if you don't want to be a commodity, if you don't want your team to be a commodity, if you want your leaders to understand and feel and appreciate the value, emotion puts people in motion. When they hear you caring and talking about the bigger things that they're also interested in, they start to care too. Okay, so those are two of the strategies. Let's go into a third, and then we'll stop and take some more questions because I know you have them, okay? All right. The third strategy to avoid becoming a commodity or to get out of the trap if you're already there is to stop doing the busy work. Now, what do I mean by the busy work? We were actually just having this conversation with the team who's managing this webinar for IBC Heritage. Anybody ever realize that there's a portion of things they do that might be administrivia, or even, I like to use the word communistration? You know, the communication profession is often the connective tissue between a lot of things in our businesses. It smooths the joints. But what happens to communication professionals is that they can then get sucked into work that is not their best and highest use, and take on the busy work, take on things that are of lower value than the value that they are meant to deliver, because they want to be good team players, or there's nobody else to do it. That's a trap. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. It always sounds easier than it is. And this also very much, this is a flag for me for a lot of women, and especially young women, that it sounds like it would just be easy to, oh yeah, I can arrange the team lunch, or, oh, I can coordinate everybody's schedules for the meeting. When you start doing that, it's a slippery slope of then people devaluing your professional expertise, the strategic work that you bring, the higher value, the so what. Because doing the day-to-day, the scheduling and the ordering lunch, I mean, there is a profession for that. That's an administrative profession. When you're doing that, you're moving yourself into a different group, a different area, and you are devaluing the value of what you bring professionally. And when you decide to stop doing the busy work, when you look at all of these things that you're doing and you think about how much of this is in my superpower space and how much of it is not, when you are solely focused on what's in your superpower space, and by the way, that's typically the stuff that you're getting paid for, the stuff where your job is valued for, or the stuff your clients or your customers want from you more. When you get clear, you can get focused. When you stop doing the busy work, you can do less and actually make more of a difference. So, those are 3 strategies that you can use, and you can use them right now to get clear on your superpower space. What is your best and highest use? If you can't find it, get some help. To be mastering the art of bragging, to start talking about the things that you're doing and talking about them at that higher level. Like, why does it matter? And using emotion in that too, because emotion puts people in motion. And stopping the busy work, because that's just a distraction. That just fills your calendar and keeps you away. And sometimes it keeps you away from what might be the harder work, but it's going to be the more valuable, important work, the non-commodity work that nobody else can do except you. So, want to take a pause, take a time check, have another glass of water, and let Greg, why don't you give us some more questions?
All right, just give you a time perspective, Darcy. We've got about 7 minutes left before we want to wrap up.
Yep.
Let me give you these questions that came in. Most of these came in during your discussion about bragging. How about the difference between qualitative bragging and quantitative bragging? And is there a difference, in your mind?
So I can't read the mind of the questioner. Certainly if you mean in terms of, are you talking about something that has a quality versus something that has a number? I think if you have numbers for things, that is always more powerful, right? To be able to pull out the numbers that there were 1,200 people in that meeting, or the combined total number of 1 million consultant hours that were saved by that one process. That's always powerful. But there are things where the qualitative is helpful too. So if that person has something deeper that they're asking behind that, they're welcome to contact me after, and I'll try to get a little bit more specific on that.
I neglected to give you the beginning of the question, so that's on me. Does the difference we make need to be expressed quantitatively or qualitatively?
Oh, so not necessarily. So sometimes the difference that you make can be expressed in terms of your own point of view. Like what is avoided? Back to the risk piece. What's avoided because of what you do? What is gained? Often we might not, especially when we're first starting this, we might not have numbers. We might not have evidence, but don't let that stop you from giving it a try. If you have evidence, because you can gather evidence, that's fantastic. Quantitative is always, numbers are the language of business, right? Don't ever say, oh, I'm a communicator, I'm not a numbers person, or communicators math. Don't do that. Numbers are the language of business. But if you can't quantify it, don't let that get in your way of starting to talk about the value and the bigger contribution that you make that's beyond the actual thing you're executing.
Okay, here's another question. Can you talk about gender differences in bragging? I feel like there is a difference in how women and men are perceived when they talk about their proud accomplishments.
So the data is pretty clear that the perceptions on women are very different for thousands, millions of things that happen in our world, right? So, and at the same time, I think that if we are not taking steps to talk about the things that we're proud of. And again, remember that the change here is you're not doing it just for yourself. You're not saying, hey, look at me, look how fancy I am. You're doing it through the lens of this is how I serve. This is how I make a difference. This is my contribution. And you're also doing it through your own lens of adding emotion in it so that it is your point of view. So we can never control anybody else's reaction to anything that we do. But if we don't do the things that we know that we need to do, I always say, you know, we can only control 3 things: everything you say, everything you do, and everything you think. And if you don't say the things that need to be said, if you don't express the point of view that other people don't know how you contribute, they can't do the math, put it together. If you're not doing that because you're worried about what someone else will think, then you're not even in the game, because so what if they don't think highly of you? That's their issue. So I'd say don't use, oh, well, if I say this as a woman, someone's going to think differently. If they do, then that's then you then start to build the relationship from there. I've seen people do this quite often where they've been actually surprised. And I do this in rooms with even people who know each other. And people are excited to hear what's going well for other people. They're excited to have more level of specificity and to have the stories that says, this is something, oh, now I know what she's all about. Now I know, have a better picture of how she contributes. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, and then this is a question that I think a lot of people on the phone can identify with. What if the quote-unquote busy work is what needs to be done to manage the communication deliverables and you don't have anyone else on your team?
Yeah, so this is where, first of all, taking a hard inventory of it, taking a hard look at it, of what actually creates value that your leaders care about. Because a lot of times we make it look easy. We're absorbing all that because we think it should happen. But what if you dropped a ball? What if you chose some of those lower value things and you actually didn't do them, or didn't do them as frequently? I've had plenty of clients who have come to me with, I'm overwhelmed, I just need some help sorting through time, and recognizing that they're making assumptions about things that they're doing that no one else cared about. I had a client just last week who we actually went through, you know, what are the things on your list that are not in your superpower space? And there were 3 or 4 things that were analysis and reports of other people's data. And I said, so do they look at what you do? She's like, I have no way of knowing. Like, well, let's ask. You know, they're not thinking it takes you 3 hours to put it together. When she went and just asked, they're like, oh no, we could do like a 15-minute call every month to catch up on that data. I don't need that report. So I would challenge you that there may be a lot of those things that you have, and maybe they were right 3 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, but to take a clean look now, because they may not be things that you need anymore, and you can get rid of a lot of that busy work to open yourself up for the work that matters.
Okay, thanks, Darcy. That's all we got right now.
Great. So one more story before we wrap up. And again, if you want the follow-up materials, they're here for you. At this point, your head might be exploding because, yeah, you're like, how can I do that? I don't have a team. I don't know what my superpowers are. I'm an introvert. I don't feel comfortable talking up to my leaders. And I get it. This is a different way of thinking and looking at your work. But here's a story I want to leave you with. Jeff Bezos, who, unless you've been off planet lately, you know, is the CEO of Amazon. He told a story about a friend of his who wanted to do the perfect freestanding handstand. Now, why anybody wants to do this, I'm not really sure. But she was in shape and she saw other people do it on Insta and she just thought it would be easy. And she went to the gym and she tried a few times and it wasn't easy. It felt like failure. She felt like, how am I the only person that doesn't get this? Why can't I get it right? And she talked to somebody at the gym, and a trainer of hers told her this, which she told Jeff Bezos. And I think it's really relevant to share with you as you're thinking about how not to be a commodity, how to avoid the traps. If you think you're going to figure it out quickly, you'll just end up quitting. But don't. Take the first step. Take a baby step. Think about your superpowers. Get clear on that. Get clear on what's on your to-do list that's not in your superpowers. Try a little brag bite in the 5 minutes before your next meeting. Try something different. But don't wait, no matter what you do, please don't wait to start talking about and thinking about your higher value, not only for your career and not just for your community and not just for the profession, but for the world, because we need you in our world of work now more than ever. With that, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Greg, go back to you for more questions and for wrap up.
Okay. Thanks, Darcy, for bringing us these insights. And now we have just a few minutes left to entertain any additional audience questions if we have one. Give you a minute to get set up.
Or if I didn't answer the question.
Oh, I was just going to say that you can see this, the thought starters we put up at the beginning of the session. If anyone wants to ask a question, now's your chance. And I don't see any right now, so I think we answered every single question. Okay. Oh, wait, here's one. What if you were the director of communications, but never get invited to leadership meetings?
Mm-hmm. So my question to the person who, first of all, I would say, have I asked? You know, do I know why I don't get invited to meetings? If I believe I need to be at the meetings, you know, am I having a communication plan with all the stakeholders in the meetings where I have the opportunity to re-communicate what it is that I really do? Because people get sloppy, and I don't even just mean us, I mean everybody. We get comfortable that we're the director of communication and everybody assumes they know what that is, but they don't. You know, you're not just a director of communication. You're the director of connection and sales, or you're the director of understanding and action. I mean, what's the bigger thing that you really do? And it's often a good exercise to just take that big step back. And if I'm not getting heard, I'm not getting invited to the meetings, or my voice isn't getting heard in, you know, in the meetings that I'm in, it's what's the language they're using? What are the things that they need to be hearing from me to respond? So talking about those bigger things, and sometimes even what are the bigger things that I know they care about? Can I make the path? Can I connect the dots to those things? And then you'll start seeing people responding when you're talking in their language and not in yours.
Got it. All right. Do you have any examples, or have you heard of any stories where someone was commoditized and then reversed their fortunes?
Yes.
By using some of these principles?
Yes. So I had a client who was a director of communication and had just over time gotten into the rut, if you will, of as we add more and more execution tools, managing more and more, again, I'll use the word stuff, without it connecting or having bigger meaning. And so, you know, she was doing this, and then she had a new boss. And her boss was not a professional communicator. And the boss looked at what this person was doing and said something along the lines of, my 8-year-old could do that. Because all that boss, who was not a professional communicator, saw was executing stuff, pushing buttons and, you know, putting logos on things. So she had to take a big step back and look at the work she was doing, start saying no to certain things, start renegotiating certain expectations, and went back to her boss with the vision of, this is really what this role is all about. Because what she hadn't done is explain to that new boss all the things that she did in between, all the facilitation that she did around all the stakeholders, around messaging, all of the coordination that she was doing across field locations. So she was able to re-communicate and hit the reset button on her role. And so it is possible, you can do it. And of course, I've got resources to help you. And if I can help you further, you have my information to reach out and talk about your specific situation too.
Okay, I don't see any other questions right now. So we're getting close to the end time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. First, Darcy, thanks for sharing your opinions with us. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up, and if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Darcy on social media or on our website. I do want to remind people that our series continues March 24th at noon with a webinar organized by the IABC DC Metro chapter. Communication expert and leadership coach Tracy M. will present on the topic, Connecting Equity, Inclusion and Diversity to Reputation Management and Organizational Results. You can register now at the URL on your screen. Also, potential speakers are always welcome. If you're interested in presenting, let us know at communication@iabcheritage.com. And as we close, I wanted to share a few things as we part company. First, if you have any further questions for Darcy, you can connect with her social media via LinkedIn or email or her preferred channels. Please don't forget to complete the survey. It will open as you exit. Remember to register for the March 24th webinar. If you have any questions about the webinar or the IABC Heritage region, or you'd like to get more involved, email them to communication@iabcheritage.com. And last but not least, don't forget that March is IABC Membership Month. To learn about IABC membership benefits, visit iabc.com/membership. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.